answering the call will place us in front of people of influence to present the gospel to them. And when the Christians remain silent, injustice flourishes.
This is the Active Church. To God be the glory.
Earlier in the year, I spoke about the seven mountain strategy, which was developed by Bill Bright, who was the founder of Campus Crusade, and Lauren Cullingham, who was the founder of Youth with a Mission. And they developed this strategy, which is a God-given strategy, I believe, in terms of what controls the culture of a nation. And they spoke about the fact that there are 7 spheres of influence, 7 of them. And those 7 spheres of influence determine where that nation is going to go. All right, the first one is religion. And if you look up on the screen there, you will see them. The sphere of religion. Now that sphere is what we're doing here in church. All right? The sphere of religion will determine where a culture goes. What a nation believes will determine the direction that they'll be headed in. If they believe in Jesus as their Lord and Savior as a nation, if the majority of the nation believes in Jesus as their Lord and Savior, they will move in the direction of biblical values. What has happened is that you get places, for example, in the Middle East, where that mountain is dominated big time by Islam. You go to Europe, it used to be Christianity that dominated that, but it's now postmodernism. If you come to South Africa, there's 2 things that are competing for this. The one is postmodernism and the other one is Islam. The church is still in charge of that mountain in South Africa, though. The church is powerful here because of the amount of people that are Christians. The second sphere of influence is the family. What people will be taught in their homes is going to have a massive bearing on where they're going to end up in life. Why do you think it is that the average person who's born in a poor family will stay poor for the rest of their lives? Why do you think it is that the average person who's born in a rich family will stay rich for the rest of their lives? Because what we learn, especially when we're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, those sort of years, is going to have a massive, massive impact on how we're going to live our lives. We hate our parents, but we copy them at the same time. We find ourselves saying and doing the same things that they used to do. The third sphere of influence is the sphere of education. And if you look at education, at one time the education system in South Africa was unapologetically Christian and incorporated the Bible. It incorporated prayer and incorporated biblical values in every aspect of school life. Right? If you go and you look now, and you go and you look at what the education policies are now in our country, children are inundated with liberal ideologies, atheistic thinking, and postmodern principles in our public schools and our universities. They basically taught that there is no God. They basically taught that over and over and over again, there is no God. And in many areas, they are being indoctrinated with often false, biased, and anti-biblical information. And I'll just give you one example. I know, for example, that the nation of Israel is not a perfect nation. They're full of human beings who are sinners just like all of us. But the world does not treat Israel fairly. The world says that Israel must just eat rockets that get fired at them and never attack back. But if Syria fires 3 mortars, not even rockets, into Turkey, then Turkey has the full right to go to war with Syria. So the world is not treating Israel fair. And if you go and you look in our universities and in our schools, what is being taught is an anti-Israel bias. If you look at the government, Proverbs 14 verse 34 says, righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. You know, if you go and look many times in the Old Testament, a nation's moral standards are dependent on those standards that are exhibited by its leaders. Or in a democracy, the predominant political party. All right? We live under a situation in our nation and in much of especially the Western world, where we have a media that have a progressive liberal agenda. Okay, and we have leaders that have a progressive liberal agenda, And that these governments and even organizations like the United Nations are empowered by well-known men and women. And they've made significant gains in the political arena over the past few decades. I'll just give you something. I actually mentioned it in January. But there was a news article that's saying that 2 organizations working with abused children have welcomed the court ruling against the criminalization of consensual acts between teenagers. Consensual sexual acts, between teenagers. The judgment by the North Gauteng High Court was a victory. The Teddy Bear Clinic for Abused Children and resources aimed at prevention of child abuse and neglect, REPCAN, said on Wednesday. One of the comments to this article, because it was one that I saw online, it was of News 24, someone said, "Welcome to the new normal." In other words, if our 12, 13-year-olds are having sex, hey, that's cool, eh? If a 16-year-old has sex with a 12-year-old, that's cool. All right, that's what that court said. And at the end of the day, people then will actually defend it. Because a lot of people will defend. In fact, the majority of people will probably defend this. The 5th sphere of influence, the 5th mountain, is the media mountain. And the media mountain includes radio, TV stations, newspapers, internet news, opinion, blog sites, etc. The media. Those that are responsible for putting out the news. Now, I always used to believe that the media in the Western world were unbiased. You know, like 702 says, in touch, in tune, and independent. Okay, I know for a fact now, because especially when I look at what's happening with the persecuted Christians, that that's not the case. Very rarely is there a news bulletin about what's going on with Christians in those countries. I remember, for example, Pastor Narakani in Iran. One time, I heard one thing about it on 702 once. And never again did I hear. In fact, then there was an outcry from the Muslims about what was being done to that man. And if you look at this, the media has the potential to sway popular opinion on current issues based on its reporting, which is not always truthful and accurate. In other words, they can affect elections. And if you go and you study the elections of 2008, 2012, the media seriously affected the results of those elections. Even in terms of who ended up standing for those presidential races, the media seriously affected that. If you look at arts and entertainment, that's the 6th mountain. Arts and entertainment is one of the most influential shapers in our society today. That's music, it's filmmaking, it's television, it's social media, the performing arts, and all of these things that drive our cultural taste. If you look at what our media is teaching, it's destroying marriage. Marriages are being totally destroyed. And that's why we've got things like active worship and active studio, and that's why we're making movies at the camp, you know, Christ Avengers. And we're going to be making a movie next year, and that's why we're doing that stuff. Believe me, it's a lot of work, but that's why we're doing it. This last mountain is the mountain of business. All right, and this is people who have the ability to create wealth. And obviously, in this area, because you're often talking about people who have access to large sums of money through idolatry and through worshiping money, there's the potential for great corruption. And we're seeing that in our nation on a daily basis. Why is there corruption? People got all sorts of excuses and reasons. No, there's massive corruption because people are sinners and people will get away with what they can get away with. And the reality is, in this country, you can get away with it. So most people, the overwhelming majority of people, when they get the opportunity to be corrupt because they can score out of it, they jump. And what has happened is that in terms of all of these things, the church has stepped back, except for the religion one. Because at one stage, the church used to be influential over all of those things in Western society. The church stepped back, other people took in and took control. And so that's where we sit today. We sit with a mess. And God is calling you into positions of influence. But to be a person of influence for the kingdom, you must have a heart for the kingdom. You must have a heart where you put in the Lord first. And also, in order to have influence, you need to understand influence. Because there's certain things you're going to have to do that are uncomfortable. And the first thing you have to realize about influence is that influence requires that you use your voice, that you speak. For example, that you tell people about Jesus. Acts 24 verse 1, 5 days later, the high priest Ananias went down to Caesarea with some of the elders and a lawyer named Tertullus, and they brought charges before Paul and before the governor. You know, Paul ended up in front of powerful leaders in the Roman Empire, but this came after he went to the temple in Jerusalem with a reputation for preaching the gospel. And even though he did nothing there, his reputation went before him, and they freaked out. They freaked out about the fact that he was there. When you use your voice, I want you to understand something, that everyone speaks. The only time that your voice will be heard, the only time that your voice will count, is if your voice is different. And in our society today, if you speak the truth, your voice will be different. If you speak about what's really going on, if you tell the truth about why we have certain problems, if you say what is happening with integrity, your voice will be different. If you want influence, you cannot sit back. You have to use your voice. You've got to start speaking up about these issues. You know, if you look at all of the things that are going on with drugs and all that sort of stuff, you can sit there and think that if you keep quiet, that you can keep your house safe. You can't. It's going to affect you. For those of you with little children, your little children, they're going to be influenced somewhere along the line by people with drugs. And the issue is, it depends very much, first of all, as to how you're using your voice to push back the waves of evil that are coming all the time, in terms of, you know, whether that's going to help your kids or not. And the second thing is, what have you put inside them? If they're full of faith in Jesus, you won't have to worry about that. If they don't have a faith in Jesus, and you're asking them the whole time, what do you want, my baby? That's what I see parents doing all the time. 5-year-old. What do you want? What do you want? 5-year-old. They don't know. They don't know. All right? If you let a 5-year-old dictate their diet, they'll be eating ice cream only. And let them eat that for 3 months. And see how healthy they will be. And bloating up and being overweight will not be the main problem. They will be sick. Right? You got to put something inside of them. You got to use your voice. If you don't use your voice, you'll have no influence. Those that keep quiet have no influence. All right? But again, I want to say in terms of this, it's not opening your mouth about opinions. It's opening your mouth about Jesus. Opening your mouth about the fact that He's the solution for all the problems that people have, because He is. Right? We love to open our mouth about our opinions. Oh, I have an opinion about this. I have an opinion about that. I have an opinion about the next thing. In fact, I'm very opinionated. So therefore, Gavin, I'm doing that one. It's not about your opinion. It's about God's opinion. When you speak about an opinion, you speak about God's opinion. And God's opinion is that everyone needs to be saved. That's the most important opinion there is. Everyone needs to be saved. And God's opinion is something we need to take cognizance of, because He knows what's going to happen. If you want influence, you can't just sit back. Using your voice comes at a price. Man, people will take you out for this. They will. It takes courage to go against the flow. It takes a lot of courage to go against the flow. Anyone can just go with the flow. But to stand up and go against what everyone else around is doing, and to start saying something different to what most people around you are saying, man, it takes courage. And the issue is, when you go against the flow and you start putting Jesus first, you're actually going against the flow of what many Christians say. Because we as Christians have been massively influenced by these spheres of influence. The second thing that you need to understand about influence is that influence will cause the status quo to call one a troublemaker. I read something this week which shocked me. But a document came out that they used for training for the US military. A thick document. And part of the document speaks about organizations that the US military considers to be extremist. Obviously, you'd have organizations there like Al-Qaeda. And they actually say that in terms of these organizations, military personnel are not allowed to be involved in any organization like this. Do you know who else is on the list? Organizations that are extremist? The Catholic Church. Any evangelical church, basically that would be us. We're extremists. Pentecostal churches, we're extremists. So what they're telling the soldiers is, if you're part of one of those organizations, you can't be a soldier in the American army. So now, clearly, the people in charge here don't want the Christians to have a voice. So if you have influence, you will cause the status quo to call you a troublemaker. Acts 24 verse 5. We have found this man to be a troublemaker. This is what they said about Paul. Stirring riots among the Jews all over the world. He is a ringleader of the Nazarene sect. Okay, our mountains of power are controlled by people that are opposed to Christ. There's one still in South Africa, that's the religion one, that is held by the church. But there are people that are pushing mightily for that to be taken over. When the church stands up, she will attract angry responses from very powerful people. Paul was branded a troublemaker by the Jewish leaders because he spoke up. You see, when we speak up, we threaten the power bases of the people that run the show. Because let me tell you, if you tell people about Jesus, you're going to threaten to bring about a revolution. And it's not a revolution like the ones that we normally see with guns and weapons. It'll be a revolution of values. It'll be a revolution of values. Those in power will not just sit back and leave us. One of the things that astounds me is that Barack Obama sits there and he talks about the fact that they must go into Syria because the Syrian government used chemical weapons against their people. You know, the funny thing is, over 60 million unborn babies have been murdered in America since a case called Roe versus Wade basically legalized abortion in America. They've killed over 60 million innocent children. And they want to go in and bomb the hell out of Syria because they say, and there's no proof by the way, but they say that Syria used chemical weapons on their people. And that 1,300 of them died. Right? What I want you to realize when you sit down and you think about these things, this happens because people have an anti-biblical view. And I'm telling you now, whenever anti-biblical people and antichrist people are in charge, injustice takes place. Injustice upon injustice upon injustice. And you go and you look at many of the injustices that are there in South Africa today. The government likes to blame the whites, let's be honest. Government loves to blame me. It's my fault. Personally, I'm white, so it's my fault. And I own all the money in South Africa, according to Julius Malema. I'm, yokes are all poor poverty. I've got all the money. Okay, even though many of the people I see driving brand new X5s and all sorts of things are black. Let me be honest. I'm not the problem in South Africa. All right? There are white people with terrible attitudes. Terrible attitudes. I don't dispute that. But there are black people with terrible attitudes. Terrible attitudes, I also don't dispute that. That's not our problem. Those things aren't our problem.
We all come from different walks of life, but there is nothing like coming together with a common cause at the end of the day. Growth Activation Groups are all about Jesus, God's life-changing word, and fellowship with great friends. If you would like to join a GA group, which takes place on a Tuesday evening from 7:30, go down to the info desk after the service and you will get all the details you need.